around the mic. Shove around the mic.
This is a Facebook. I hope y'all enjoy this. Yeah, it's all advanced. Like I say for music to stop here or what?
I see Gary.
Do you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Do you hear me now?
I hear you now.
All right. Well, here I is. So you got the Three Stooges here in front of you.
Yeah. So if this works, what I would suggest is you rotate 90 degrees because they're okay.
Well, we'll rotate 90 degrees. Do we want to rotate 90 degrees? I guess. All right. Hang on, Tom. We're going to rotate 90 degrees.
We're going to make you upside down, Tom.
Bob.
So you guys rotate 90 degrees.
Just in case.
Way too much going on right now for the microphone.
Oh dear.
This is Gary.
Hey.
This is Gary. Can you hear me?
No, I was distracted.
So do we want to raise the?
That's why I was so distracted.
Well, if we raise it up a little higher, it may help the mic.
I believe they can hear us okay.
Not them, Tom.
Tom, you hear us okay?
I do.
Hey, Tom, it's Gary. That's what we've been doing. You hear me, Tom?
Yes.
All right.
I hear you.
All right. Good.
I don't see any of you,
Oh,
but I can hear you.
Can you all hear me?
I hear you. You sound like you're in a barrel.
You all in the audience, you can hear up here?
here.
Okay.
Whether we want to or not.
David, is this going to feed to Tom?
Yes, it should be right now.
Tom's feet.
Okay, he wants to see them.
Okay.
He's kind of far away.
Right now, I see icons across Bob's forehead.
Whoa, that was a little too much.
I'm so glad Gail Rigsby
What?
is not here to witness this.
Brian, up the top of the screen's what he's seeing.
How do you know he's not watching it online?
I hope not right now.
I don't hear the swear words.
So can you see the gentleman now? And
Or these guys?
He might be at home laughing at us.
See if he
No,
can
he
see.
wouldn't. He doesn't use the computer, remember?
Joe, ask him if he can see.
Brian wants to know if you can see us.
I see you.
Okay.
My job is done.
Would this help? You want to
Bob
try
seems to
it?
have lights up over his eyes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
We think we got this now.
What do you got?
Whatever it is, I'm sure some ointment will clear it right up.
Larry, so here's the deal. Mo, if you can talk to Tom, you can into the laptop.
This is starting to look like Mystery Science Theater 3000 with the shadows.
Talk to the audience.
Robot chicken coming up next?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Larry, Curly, and Mo. You pick who's who.
Don't move.
This is my live.
1 minute.
Well, I was going to move the cursor out of his eyeball if I could.
That's that computer.
Larry, Curly, and Mo.
Strange people.
Tom, I saw the horse head and the flame nebula.
Okay, it's 3 o'clock. We're gonna get started here.
Let it roll.
Brian,
All right. Now, as you may
Dan Payton's in the waiting room.
have surmised here, this is going to be a little different. Okay, this is going to be this is going to be a lot different. But
Sure.
Yeah.
because of some of the tech issues, it's
In scores of interest, UNC is winning their, with 5 seconds to go, in overtime.
go Heels. This is because of the technological stuff. This is going to look a little strange, okay? But what we had planned for this afternoon's session is a discussion, a panel discussion about the history of BoBfest. And earlier I said that we would have a surprise. So on the screen is the surprise. Some of you know who this gentleman is. This is Tom English, formerly of Gardner-Webb University. Now he's at, massive applause for Tom English in the background here. He is now at Guilford Tech Community College in Jamestown, North Carolina. Tom was one of the founding participants in BoBfest, and he has dug up all kinds of incriminating evidence on the original founders of this event.
He just left. I think he's scared of
Oh, he'll be back. He'll be back. He loves this. And Tom and I sat down last week, and we have prepared a list of questions. This is not a script. And by the way, how long is this going to last? This is going to last 45 minutes. So somebody keep a timer on us. And the way this is going to work is I'm just going to sort of act as the moderator. These three are going to do most of the talking because they've been here from the beginning. I'm still basically, as far as BoBfest goes, I'm a teenager with gray hair. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the history of BoBfest. And the cool part is if you all have questions, feel free to relay them to me somehow up front, and I will relay them to the old timers up here, and we'll get your questions answered, okay? Because we don't claim that this list of questions is all-inclusive.
So we start with the phone call.
Well, hold on just a second. So this is Gary Addington. Stand up for a moment, Gary, let everybody see it. Gary is a member of our club, and he is a BoBfest old-timer, and I mean that in the most respectful form of the word there. And of course, everybody knows Bob. This is the Bob, and we're going to talk about that. And of course, Tom English. I'm your friendly moderator, Joe Hefner. So, welcome to this little background history session here. So, I'm just going to throw out the first question here, and do you want me to direct it at somebody, or?
Depends on the question.
Well, the question is, what motivated the Cleveland County Astronomical Society to hold the first BoBfest? And I'm told that there's something about Christmas.
The great Christmas show-off, that the Rock Hill Club had, Carolina Skygazers. They were going to have a dinosaur exhibit. They could not have their exhibit or their event, and I called Tom English and let him know. Tom?
So let me just read from the Cleveland County Astronomical Society newsletter. This phone call happened the first week of December 1992, and I was working on the newsletter that week, and the last announcement on the last page, there was one about selling hand warmers right after it, but said, "Astronomers of the region unite. We are considering hosting a gathering of regional astronomers at Gardner-Webb sometime in January. Plans for the program include a range of speakers and a star party. Expect to hear more about this at the December meeting. Anyone interested in participating should let Tom or Bob know." And then, in the January newsletter, we announced it to the world. And let me read that. "How about this for moving up in the world? Sure, we're a small club, but we're doing enough good stuff to show ourselves off. The whole idea for this festival of stars and planets and nebulae and galaxies and equipment came about when Bob and I were talking on the phone about who in the Carolina Skygazers should get our newsletters. Bob said the Skygazers weren't having a great Christmas gift show-off this year, and I replied, why don't we have it instead? Bob was immediately sold on the idea. That's not a bad idea. And so here we are. So Bob and Chris Glaze and I have done most of the planning and organization so far, but we need the rest of the club to help by coming out to the event. Tell your friends, it'll be great. What I recall from the phone conversation was, Bob immediately, I mean, because Bob is the ambassador of amateur astronomy in the Carolinas, I said, well, Bob, who can you call? And he immediately had ideas for like 6 speakers and was going to call everybody he knew right after we got off the phone and say, we think we're going to do this. And I said, wait a minute, I got to make sure I can reserve the space, which I was able to secure the next day. The Rich Banquet Hall in the Dover Campus Center. And then we were off and running then, and I think Bob got out a little over his skis there because if you look at the first program, which I understand, Bob, you have there, we had like 6 or 7 speakers. Later we learned that you really shouldn't have that many, but we were fortunate and unfortunate that 2 of them canceled. In fact, they were the headliners, Bob, Ariel, and Tom.
Oh. Flip.
Letter
Yep, there we go.
says we had 80 people. And so getting the word out, I mean, we basically had a month to get the word out.
So there were approximately 80 people at that first event?
We still had 80 people there. Yep. And so, you know, this couldn't have happened if Bob didn't know everybody and everybody knows Bob. And, you know, our idea was the Rock Hill event would not be that hard to pull off. And that we could do it anywhere basically, and why not us? Because, I mean, when Bob calls, everybody's interested in doing stuff with Bob, so here we are.
So BoBfest came about as a result of taking over the planning of an event where people got together to show off their cool Christmas gifts. I assume, were those Christmas gifts related to astronomy?
Yes, they were.
Like astronomical Christmas gifts? Okay. Okay.
And my guess is that most of what got showed off wasn't actually Christmas gifts, it was just, you know, amateur astronomers and slot tables and displays.
Christmas was just the excuse to
Right.
get everybody together.
Camaraderie.
Okay. Okay. Well, I would like to know, and I'm sure other people want to know, when did this become BoBfest? What is the history of the Bob in BoBfest? Who wants to take this, Tom or Bob?
It sounds
Well-
better than Tom Fest.
Go ahead.
So the official name of the event was always a regional meeting of amateur astronomers,
That was my boring name I gave you.
which, you know, we actually struggled to figure out what to call it. And then after going back and forth, we came up with that. Bob blessed that. He thought that sounds good. And so that's what we're calling it. But, you know, what it was Bob's event.
Didn't
And,
Chris Glaves call
Chris
it?
Glaves, yeah, Chris Glaves and I came up with it. I think Chris probably was the source of it. Why don't we call it BoBfest? Sure enough, that's what we all called it. I mean, it says on all of the programs, a regional meeting of amateur astronomers, but, you know, at first we didn't even officially call it BoBfest. I think, I was trying to make sure we sounded really official with the administration at Gardner-Webb, so it didn't look like we were doing something silly.
Something
We never actually called it that. And actually, Chris and I are also the source of the strange way that Bob spells his name, though Bob himself doesn't actually spell it that way.
Tell
I
us,
don't do it that
how did
way.
that second B become stylized? Was that just to set the name apart, or what?
No, it was totally, Chris and I had a kind of irreverent spirit every month as we started playing with the newsletter. And just one, it might have been a typo or something, and then we said, that looks cool. So we just started spelling his name that way everywhere. I think it really kind of bothered Bob at the start.
Did it bother
He's
you?
like, you spelled
Well,
my name
I
wrong.
thought that was a bit weird.
But then again, so are
He
we.
eventually just embraced it and went on with it because he knew we weren't gonna change it. One of our greatest hits, we used to have a top 10 list in every month's newsletter, was top 10 alternate spellings of Bob.
I'm getting ideas for resurrecting our own newsletter.
My favorite of those was 808. That was always one I really liked.
We were with I was with the Gaston Amateur Astronomers, and we had attended the Christmas event down in Rock Hill, several of us. And we got to see that there was a lot of neat equipment that was being hand-built at that point in time. I guess the mainline companies that sell the Cassia Grains and the Meade and Celestron, they were just, I think, getting on board and selling, mass-producing telescopes, but a lot of this was, people were making their own stuff. We got the opportunity to see a set of 10-inch reflecting binoculars that were put together down there. Those were neat. And the idea that after the Christmas show-off was gonna go away, we thought, well, what's gonna happen now as far as seeing new equipment that people are hobbling together? I mean, this was what we were doing as a club in Gaston County. We were trying to make up our own telescopes and stuff to get into this. And we were seeing some neat stuff at the Christmas show-off. And getting to talk to a lot of people who were building things, which I thought was fantastic. And then when I heard that Ballfest was going to continue on from the Christmas show-off, I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to keep this going. So to me, that's how the Gaston Club became involved with it. And other clubs, Charlotte Club, Statesville, a lot of innovative stuff was going on at that time.
You know, my recollection is I went to the show-off with Ken Bassey in '91. He had gone in 1990 and was talking a lot about it at those very early CCAS meetings. And so I got in his truck and drove down there with him in '91. And my impression of it was, you know, as an event, this isn't really a very exciting thing because there's not much going on except a whole bunch of guys showing off equipment, which itself was really cool. There's a big long table in the middle of the room with lots of stuff laid out on it. And I don't even remember if there were any speakers at those early events. There were, I know Leon Knott was doing mirror making classes down at the museum down then. Didn't Bobby?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that, doing a 14.5-inch mirror.
Yep.
I didn't think I'd ever finish it, but it turned out all right.
I'm going to pose a new question now, and I want each one of you to answer this. There are a lot of people still around who were here at the founding of BoBfest, but we'll do Tom, Bob, and then Gary. I'd like you to mention somebody who you remember, for whatever reason, who is no longer with us.
Tom Lorenzen, for one. Tom Lorenzen, Bob Ariel. Yeah.
Tell him who Tom
Hey.
Lorenzen is. Or what? Tell him who Tom Lorenzen was.
Tom Lorenzen was the author of 1,000 plus deep sky objects. And it was like an observing guide, and it was very good. And speaking of Bob Ariel, his collection of telescopes are down in Columbia at the museum. It's a very, very impressive display. And some of them go way back. Some of the books of his go way back. And Bob he really taught us a lot about the history of, you know, the old refracting telescopes and other telescopes, and master of astronomy.
If I'm not mistaken, Bob Ariel collected vintage Alvin Clark refractors and restored them, or did he collect other refractors by other makers as well, or was it primarily Alvin Clark's?
Cook,
Cook?
He wrote a book on the Clarks.
Brashears,
Brashears,
you
okay.
name it.
Lundeen.
Yeah.
Those are names that make some of us literally tingle when we hear them because of the craftsmanship. Speaking of Tom Lorenzen's 1000 Plus, if you come to LMO tonight, we'll show you our copy of 1000 Plus. It's a very well-known observing guide. Gary, who's someone that you remember who's no longer around?
I guess the name that comes to my mind is Frank Barrett. Back then, I guess it's been 20 years maybe, he got into digital photography, whereas none of us had really thought anything about that. And we were really, really green at that point. We were still phasing out of film astrophotography, because as the old saying goes, it's one of the easiest things you can do, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever try to do. He was doing digital work, and he was doing very good digital work from the driveway of his home in Mount Holly over in Gaston County. And to see his photographs, I would put them up against anything you see on astronomy, astrophoto of the day that you see online. And he came and did a talk with all the intricacies of how he got these photos. We had no clue what flats, darks, or bias shots were, and he went through a great explanation of why you need to do this. So I think Frank Barrett ranks high in my mind as far as not here with us anymore.
I have one of Frank's prints at home, and they were truly gorgeous.
Tom?
So, let me echo Bob. I'll say this. Bob Ariel wrote the book on the Clarks, with Devin Warner.
He signed my copy.
And,
Gave me mine.
and I recall one of my absolute most favorite BoBfest talks ever was in the late 90s when Bob came and told us the story of the Cincinnati cable, where that guy had stolen the Clark lens out of there. I think it was an 8.5, and had it under his bed for a number of years, and then donated it to a school in Tennessee. And Bob was, a witness for the FBI to sort out that problem.
Stolen
And I
refractor
remember-
lens.
I remember Tom Lorenzen, neither of them could speak the first BoBfest, and brought them back later. But when Tom came back, his title was Deep Sky Observing, but it ended up being, I think, a poetry reading. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Everybody was kind of freaked out by that. But the people I want to highlight, that were really unsung heroes of the early days, were Max and Betty Morrow, and Rusty and Barbara McDonald. They turned the Cleveland County Astronomical Society into a dinner club. All of our meetings had all this great food, and then they were basically put in charge of food for BoBfest. And Betty was amazing. She basically just went around the town and said, "Don't you want to give some food for our BoBfest?" to the people who had no idea she was talking about it. But she was so nice, you couldn't say no to her. And Max and Betty and Rusty and Barbara kept the refreshment table well stocked all those early years.
How about Einstein looking through my 14.5? The dog.
No, you talking about Flash or Einstein? Einstein was
I thought
that
it was
guy
Einstein.
Kenny's dog. Flash was Max's dog.
No, that was our vice president's dog, right?
Right.
And, somebody got him up on the ladder and snapped a picture of him. That was at Max
I
and
remember
Betty's
that.
house. Two other people that, we lost. One was Bill Henson. He was with the Carolina Skygazers. to have telescopical travel program with Arlo Gardner and some other people. Ed Small, who was a friend of mine also, he died this last April. And, you know, he had a lot to do with the Sky Gazers and other clubs. Also, one of our presidents, David Herndon, he died this spring. So there's a lot of people gone, but we've gained a lot of people too.
Most, if not all, of the names that have just been mentioned here are in photographs in the montage that has been playing between sessions here. And so I know there were some names here that I did not recognize, but I did recognize a lot of them, and I can point to as well as these guys here, we can point to these people in those photographs. And we have digital copies of all these photographs, once again, thanks to Megan's archival skills here. So we need to do something to get these photographs printed out and
I can put them on the Facebook page as well.
maintain some. Oh, that would be wonderful. Let me throw out a new question here. What was it like to plan BoBfest in the early days? What were some of the logistical problems? Tom, we'll start with you.
The thing I recall was the last few days just scrambling madly to get everything together and not having any help. Usually I had whoever my observatory assistant student was, and that was Chris Gillespie for many years, and then after he graduated, he still lived in town, so he was a big help always, and a few other student assistants. But getting the room ready, we have to go in before. I know I left all the sound stuff to Bob, and I know he had lots of frustration with that. So he can talk about that specifically. But it was, you know, we had to get all those prizes up there. We had to get the prizes ordered. And back in those days, you know, we thought it was great if we had 10 door prizes. It was a lot harder to round them up when you had to write people and wait for letters to come back. But there were other things that people didn't even know about, because we had to talk to the kitchen staff to make sure that they weren't going to wander into our room and things like that. There were a lot of local issues that I had to talk to a whole lot of people to make sure they didn't disturb our event. And then just getting everything together and getting things up there in the morning. I remember arriving at like we always started at 9, and I would arrive there at 7 sharp and just start scrambling like mad.
Gary?
Well, I was not much, or not at all involved with planning, but the one thing that strikes me is that the event was held in January. And with January being a winter month, there was times where you were watching the weather on the dates to say, well, what's the weather going to be that day? And I can remember one BoBfest where we waited on the sun to get high enough in the sky to melt the ice that was on the roads, so we could get there.
That was in the 2000s, I think.
Yeah, that we arrived and to see snow had been, pushed around the parking lots and piled up on the sides, but we still managed to get BoBfest in.
We never had snow the years I was there up till 2001. I mean, I was worried about it, and I thought, why in the world did we schedule an event in January? But we never had snow trouble while I was there, and I think there's only been a couple of years where it was a problem.
We sort of considered BoBfest to be the official end of the Christmas season, with it happening in mid to late January. And I think today, did y'all notice how dark it was on your way over here to the Science Center this morning? I think this is the very first BoBfest that has ever been held after the time change, which was a little strange this morning because it's not supposed to be quite this dark.
This is really a gathering at the equinox. think about it.
And
Yeah.
we'll talk about that again. We've been talking about getting this back to its astronomical roots.
There you
And
go.
there may be some more discussion on that in the coming months. What prompted, now for many years, BoBfest was held at Gardner-Webb University. What prompted, why did you give it to this group over here in Catawba County?
It was not given to you.
Well, we didn't exactly walk up and, tell us a little bit about why it's here now instead of not
You
over
can thank
there.
Roger Ivester for that.
I'm sorry?
You can thank Roger Ivester for this.
Roger Ivester, okay.
I'll let Bob tell his story.
Okay.
Oh, what, me? Well, we had some complications that were going on that year, and there was some talk about moving it. Didn't feel like we were welcome there anymore. And it's all a bunch of confusion, misinformation that caused this. Wouldn't you say so, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the event as it stands now is a wonderful event, and I'm glad BoBfest is where it is. I think the circumstances under which it moved were unfortunate, because all of the things that you just mentioned, the sort of issues that were behind the scenes, Don Olive had already worked all of that out. Some emails got sent, and Catawba Valley got involved, and you guys are like, yeah, let's do it. And then the horse left the barn, I think. And nobody even asked Don Olive what the status of the problems were. And so
We had a hard time finding out anything, and the $800 insurance was a big one, you know.
And this is an issue. I know Joe, having worked at a college before, knows that college administrations are problematic at times. And what had happened with Gardner-Webb was they built that new student center. They put in a policy for outside groups to use it, and all colleges have these policies now. If you're an outside group, you have to have insurance, you have to have all these other things going on, all this liability stuff, and you have to pay a fee. I always got around that. I get around it at Guilford Tech with TriStar. I got around it at Gardner-Webb initially by just saying, this is an observatory event. So it's an internal event, there's no fee. But after I had left Gardner-Webb, and there was 5 years where there was nobody teaching astronomy there, and Steve Davis was trying to keep this thing running, essentially as a club event, we established that he could be an observatory volunteer from the standpoint of the science department there, but the administration didn't really understand that he wasn't anything other than the club. And so eventually somebody figured out that there was this outside group putting on this event. And so they started asking you for money. And that's where Don said, I can fix this, I can just make it an observatory event again. And he was able to get all of that worked out, but by then the emails and phone calls had happened, and the transition was already underway.
Well, and also in communications, like the president and secretary said, well, this is the astronomers. Gardner-Webb hadn't got anything to do with it. Gardner-Webb's always had something to do with it.
Right. So
Because
this
you
is
were
a
a professor there. It had always been a combined thing. It was just confusion.
But you see, in the past, we always kept this away from those people. So they didn't really even understand what was involved. But once that you're right, it was a communication issue. Once that got severed, then you guys were just another outside group. What you should have done maybe is really leaned on Don Oliver to just go fix this. And maybe he did that, and he could, you know, how administration and bureaucracies move really slowly sometimes. And he sent me a lot of emails while this was going on. He was really frustrated because he had figured it all out. That said,
We didn't know
you know,
that.
the golden age of the CCAS and BoBfest at Gardner-Webb was already past. Because the observatory had been kind of marginalized. And so there's a lot of things that added up. And, you know, obviously Catawba Valley has got a good thing going on here. And this event is moving forward, and I think you're in good hands where you are.
In a way, it was a blessing because Cleveland County, we used to have a lot of people interested in astronomy there. You know, it's like people lost interest, you know, at one time, but so much was going on here that transferring it was probably a good thing.
Yeah, in the
Very,
long run,
very
it's a good thing.
successful.
But we hope to keep, you know, the legacy alive, and we hope to get back to some of those roots again. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Let's talk about the folks on the other side of the camera here. What was the largest BoBfest attendance that you recollect? And I'll just start by saying I recollect at least a couple of meetings when there were over 100 in attendance. And this is back in the Gardner-Webb
I think
venue. So, Gary, what's the largest attendance that you remember?
Well, there was, you know, some great attendance at Gardner-Webb, but I think the first time we held it here, I saw one of the largest crowds that we've ever seen as far as turning out for BoBfest. We had out-of-state clubs coming, South Carolina, Tennessee. We did extra good. Megan can give me a better sense of that, but I think the first year we,
Throughout the day.
300,
Yeah.
okay. So,
Planetarium had a lot to do with it, I think. I think the planetarium had a lot to do with it too. I mean, that was a big draw right there to get people in, and the other type things that were available here drew a lot of people in.
Okay, so we can draw them in, but Tom, did you want to add a recollection to that?
Think about it, the museum has a regular constituency. I mean, you've got people you can advertise to regularly there that would never have come to a BoBfest in Shelby, or Boiling Springs, actually. And so, I mean, your location now really works to your advantage, that you have an opportunity to reach out to a lot of the public who's a little bit curious about astronomy, but maybe wouldn't have driven to Gardner-Webb to hear, you know, Bob and Gary and me and you talk. But they'll come in here, they'll wander around, they'll see some telescopes, they'll do the planetarium show. And so I think it's not surprising that you had such a big number that first time there. I think the highest number we had when I was there was maybe in the 120s.
That's
It
about what
was
I
a pretty
remember.
steady number, close to 100 typically.
Well, speaking of the participants, what is the farthest distance that someone traveled to attend BoBfest? And I think I know the answer to this. I'll hear what these other guys, and if anybody out there wants to comment also, but Bob, what do you think the record distance is?
I think like somebody from Florida. You remember that? Or Georgia? I know,
Florida or Georgia?
yeah.
We had some people from Atlanta, I think.
Okay. Gary?
I remember Atlanta and I remember Florida being
Well,
sites for people that come from.
Tennessee.
Jerry Barton from Augusta, Georgia always came because he was the Southeast Region Astronomical League guy.
That was way off from what I was going to say. I was going to name another country. I was
You can't
thinking,
count other speakers.
no, I'm not counting speakers. I was thinking Japan. Did we not have?
Hideaki?
Hideaki lived in Greensboro. He now lives in Japan.
So he lives in Japan
And I think
now.
1 year he had moved back, but came back to North Carolina and then came to BoBfest while he was here. So
Okay.
technically, you're probably right.
Okay.
That was worth a try.
Joe, we had two guys from Japan here in 2019 or 18.
Came to the
Came
observatory.
to the observatory after the event here. However, if we're gonna follow the Tom rules, they were students over at NC State.
So they were from Raleigh. So, okay, I guess Georgia and Florida, and we have one speaker, well, of course, now, not counting speakers, but we have one participant and speaker here, Richard Wright from Florida. So,
You know, if you count distance, we had Jeff Norwood, who was a vendor.
That's
here.
right.
He brought down all his,
You came from
uh,
New York.
yes, Camera Concepts, who has a gift certificate on our door prize. He would bring his, half his store here, which, you know, he brought it to Cleveland and then he brought it to our event. And we've not been lucky enough to have him since our first event here. But he was, you know, he was a great participant in our BoBfest.
So how did he get arranged? We never had him, I think Bob always asked us to ask him, but he was always going to Win the Star Party and he didn't want to stop by here. And eventually, I think Steve Davis was able to rope him in. Bob, do you know how that got arranged? Because he was a fixture for a while.
just while you were talking about that, somebody mentioned the Shivaks, and aren't they from Arizona?
They were the first time they came here.
That counts, y'all. Enough of this Florida stuff. Okay, so Arizona. Okay.
You mean Greensboro, Arizona?
Do what?
They're in Florida now.
They're in Florida now, right. But the first time they came, John O'Neill says they were from Arizona. They were moving, weren't they?
Yes.
They were moving back across the country.
Arizona.
So Arizona. Okay.
Now, Camera Concepts did come to Gardner Webb on the way to the Winter Star Party.
But we could not get them for many years.
Yeah, right.
We can't get them now.
They were on the way to Winter Star Party, and when we had them here, they were on the way to the Winter Star Party. We moved the date.
Okay.
Okay, this next question is going to be fun, and your answers need to be fast because we're running out of time here. Biggest BoBfest disaster you remember? We'll start with Gary. And this doesn't count.
Today doesn't count. That's a hard one. I mean, there's always been hiccups. There's no doubt about that, even as you've seen today. But to say that there's one that's the biggest disaster, I'd say no, because we have pulled this event off for 30 years, and I think we've been really successful at it. We've worried about door prizes, because door prizes keep this event going as far as funds. And I think last year, we had to go online with a bid, storefront virtual. And the year before that, vendors were not real quick to send product because they didn't have it themselves. I mean, the pandemic was just about getting going, and China was not sending product to vendors, and we struggled to come up with door prizes. So I'd say that kind of, each year, we sort of have some tense moments as to whether we're going to have enough door prizes to keep this event funded.
And this year was no exception. Bob?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay, Tom, anything come to mind for you?
You know, Bob was always frustrated because the sound didn't work to his high standards, but I don't think that's a disaster. Though I seem to recall one year at the Tucker Center, they had some real technical issues, but I wasn't involved in the planning then. The thing is that registers with me, there are a lot of times where everything went generally well, all these small hiccups. But that first year, when we'd arranged for Bob Ariel and Tom Lorenzo to be our sort of highlight speakers, along with Gail Rigsby, who never let us down. He always gave us great talks. But when both of them told us either the night before, maybe, that they weren't coming, we had to scramble around and apologize, and we gave everybody some extra time, and then Doug Gagan had a video that he'd taken through the Clark 23 at Rubber Mountain, and so we were able to pull it off. So in the end, it was great, and we realized that we probably shouldn't schedule 7 speakers anyway. But that was tense moments that first time. We thought, here we were having our event, and now it's falling apart because our marquee people aren't even here.
Danny Faulkner was another one that bailed out. Pete Kabaka right over there pulled us out of that one by doing a presentation. So, he saved us on that one.
You know, this event is basically built as a fellowship event, and so even if stuff goes wrong, everybody's hanging out and having a good time talking to each other. That to me is the bottom line.
If stuff goes wrong, it just gives you more time to meet and to talk
That's right.
with other people. Okay, we're down to about 5 minutes now, so let me throw this question open to anyone. What do you want to see at future BoBfest? This is your event. We just sort of kind of make it happen. What would you like to see at this event?
I wrote it on this so you have it for later to look at, but maybe do in sequence tabletop talks.
We're trying to record this.
Maybe do in sequence tabletop talks that goes like from beginner to intermediate, then to be more advanced. That way we can see where it starts and then where it ends, or where it continues on to.
So talks for different levels of interest?
Well, in sequence,
Oh, you mean
like level 1, 2, 3 of the same
on the
style
same
talk.
day?
On the
Same topic?
Same topic,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Anyone else?
Did you all talk about the slab?
No.
Well,
Do you remember when we had observing after BoBfest out at the slab? Talk a little bit about that.
well, okay, that
Just tell them
was
what the slab is.
Okay, that was a location where we had some friends, they had property, no lights on it. They didn't like street lights, security lights, all that. Had 300 acres, and that turned into 1,100 acres. And unfortunately, a friend, Mike Price, died of COVID a few months back. And I didn't even talk to Jackie about whether to plan to do anything or not, because, it was hard on everybody losing him. He was a person that wanted to learn about everything, including astronomy. I mean, he was a race car driver at one time. He gave, like aerial shows for us. He was a stunt pilot. And Jim Craig, who was here, I think he forgot to tell his wife about the air show. And she said, "Jim, there's a plane about to crash right in front of us." Mike put on a splendid air show. Robert and Anita Hoyle, they redid their wedding vows, a big party there and all. I mean, and there must have been 100 people at this memorial service there. And it's just so unfortunate, that he did die. He really liked people. He helped their fire department. Their fire department wanted to relocate, build somewhere else. And this property, that somebody was wanting to turn it into a dump. Mike bought the land and gave it to the fire department. That's the type of person he was.
Bob, how many BoBfest had observing sessions out at the slab? I know we did a few at the Skin and Guppy fight.
How many observing sessions were there? How many BoBfest observing sessions were there?
You know, I really don't know. It's like,
Gary thinks 5.
okay, Gary thinks maybe 5. You know, it's available, a lot of it was weather-wise too.
I have 2 recollections of being at the slab, and they happened on the same night. One of them was staying up all night, eating Hungarian dill pickles that Karma Gardner brought. And those things will keep you up all night by themselves. And that same night, we saw the aurora.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a Boy Scout troop there, and we saw the aurora. It was the second time that I had seen it, but it was the first time for a lot of people. So there was mention of, I think it was John mentioned the aurora earlier. We saw the aurora from the slab. So I remember that.
Gary was there.
Yeah, when he talks about the aurora, very rare times I've seen it here, may be just a red glow, but we saw the actual phasing that night from that site. It was not the curtain effect that you always see, but you see it change its color from like a bright red, waves down to a dimmer red, and comes back through maybe a pale green and then back up to red. We actually saw that, and that just blew us away.
Can we arrange that for tonight?
We'll try to arrange that for tonight. We could sit here and just shoot the breeze for days. Unfortunately, this slot has come to an end here. Let's
Can we
thank.
make one more thing?
Yeah,
Can we say
yeah,
one more thing?
yeah.
Just for the future, and it's not about BoBfest, but it's about what we all do. A lot of this recollection, it's made possible by people finding pictures, going back to old newsletters. And, you know, the 90s was a real golden era for Astronomy Club newsletters. But people don't hardly have newsletters anymore, or they're pretty skimpy. Everybody's relying on, you know, social media contacts and things like that, where everything's very ephemeral. And if your club doesn't have somebody designated as a historian, you're gonna lose all of what's going on now. So people need to be archiving what the clubs are doing now, so that 30 years from now, when people are saying, what is the Catawba Valley people doing back in the 2020s, and you realize it was all documented on Facebook posts that nobody knows how to find anymore. You don't really have any artifacts of what happened back then. So every club should be trying to keep track of your history. Dig up your own history, keep track of what's happening now.
Tom, next year, I'd like to see TriStar back in person. Hopefully, we'll
We're
be
planning
able
on
to
it.
do it then. Hopefully, things will work out.
I expect that we will.
Get rid of the
First Saturday in March.
Tom English, Gary Addington, Bob. You didn't even have a last name anymore, it's just Bob. Thank you for this session. We need to do this again. We need to do this again at a future BoBfest. Thank all of y'all. Please give us your input on what you would like to see this event become, because we do this for you. We don't do it for ourselves. We do this for you.
Fill
So
out your
please let us
surveys.
know. And thank you for listening to this. Thank you for tolerating the tech issues here. We'll do better at that next time. Please buy door prize tickets, because we have a lot of cool door prizes back there. And let's take a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll get rid of some door prizes.
Hey, Joe, where is the Ballfest door?
I am ashamed to admit there is no door this year. I have a metal one in my garage. The issue is that it can't easily be written on, and there was some logistical issues there. We went to look, I'm not going to tell you where we went to look. We went to look for one, and let's just say we could not find one that was suitable.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
We will have 2 next year. We will have a front door prize and a back door prize. We may even throw in some windows. Shoot, a couple of years you can accumulate a whole house.
Hey, did we
certainly
get the dumbbell
enough
back?
telescopes. I don't think they even brought the dumbbell back. So, anyway, thank you all. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back for door prizes.
You see,
Back at what time?
Back at about 10 minutes. 4 o'clock. I have to last your door prize tickets.
This is down to one bar. Just a second.